Hi everyone. Today I want to go through something a little bit different with you. I'll share my screen. Sorry. Okay. 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 So now I'm sharing on Twitch also, right? So what I want to do is look at really quite a difficult issue and try to work out, is it possible to do this? How big is it? And what else I might need to be aware of before jumping into this. So there's a few of these issues floating around. I think we can find the list. Yeah. So, okay. So if you look for like pajamas migration day issues that aren't assigned to anyone, you'll see a bunch of these replace Bootstrap and replace jQuery. And these are a lot more difficult. And I'll show you why. We'll have a look at one. Okay, so we're looking at this HAML file. So we can look in our VS Code. Already have it open, I think. Yeah. So if we look for dropdown here, this is it, right? So yeah, we'll get into like where this is displayed later, but the important thing to know currently is this is in HAML. That's why it's difficult. That's why it's harder, because usually we'd just use the GitLab UI dropdown, which is so GitLab UI dropdown is deprecated, so now we use either like a disclosure dropdown or a list. Anyway, separate topic. One thing that's interesting here is I was confused at this. I thought that when we did a HAML migration, like we can look at some other examples. Actually, we can just use this. You see how we've got like rendering pajamas card component. I thought this was rendering a view component. That's not right. That's not right at all. What it's actually doing is building a pajamas compliant component in HAML. They don't have the same source of truth. So there's two separate libraries of components we have. Right? One is GitLab UI view. One is pajamas components like this. So if you look for this component name, we can actually find the component and what it's actually doing, right? Yeah. Anyway, so the point is, I don't think we have a HAML dropdown. So instead, I might have to use the view one, which will be a bit more complex. So, also this issue is pretty old, 2 years old. So some of the information in it might be out of date. So what we're going to do is try to verify, like, is this still a relevant issue? And if so, was it not done? Sometimes issues aren't done because there's no way to do them yet. Is there a way to do them? That's the question that we want to ask. So we'll start by reading like the comments. I've done a bit of reading here, but I wanted to do more live with you so you can sort of see the thought process. I think that's useful. So I'm just gonna vocalize my thought process as I read through. Okay, so just talking about the user dropdown on the terms page. That might be what we're looking at. There's a guide to enable the feature. Again, since this is a year ago, maybe it's out of date, I'm not sure. Let's read through it. Follow this guide to enable the feature. After enabling, you'll be redirected to the page that has the drop-down in question. The drop-down is misplaced. Take that into consideration during migration. Okay, so it's in the wrong place. Good to know. This is a disclosure. A list of links. Link view can be customized. Okay, I'm sure that'll be important shortly. Okay, this is also a good sign that like something's going to be difficult, right? If a engineer has assigned it to themselves and then unassigned it, you know, it's possible that they just got busy, but also possible that this is just a lot bigger and harder than expected. Okay, so we have an epic. That's a good good find. So an epic, what an epic's going to do. Okay, so what is an epic maybe? So it's like a large, like a parent issue. So you can have an epic that has issues in it. You can also have an epic that has epics in it. You might do this if you're building a brand new feature, and then you're going to create an epic for your new feature, and then you'll create epics within that for each step of the feature. And then for each step in the feature, you're going to create a list of issues. So for our purposes here, we have an epic that handles drop-downs in HAML and how to remove calls to Bootstrap. Perfect, exactly what I want. Okay, so this says the same as our issue, which we'll just get again. Let's not lose this. Okay. So this is just the same information from the epic, but that's fine. Hoping the epic has, for starters, it'd be great if we had some merged issues, because then we can compare. But otherwise, we're going to look at comments. Yeah, great. There's a lot of merged issues, so we can have a look at these and make sure that we can see how it was done elsewhere. Great, lots of them. And any comments just to be like, I don't know, something's wrong. Fine, okay. The drop-down tag Rails helper will also generate HTML that contains the data toggle drop-down. So references to this method ought to be included in the epic as well. Okay, so what does this mean is, so in HAML, which again, HAML is a template language for Ruby on Rails, right? So what happens in HAML here is there's a drop-down tag Rails helper, a function essentially, right, which will generate HTML code that has this drop-down that we need to get rid of. So it might not look like, it might not use the same CSS. So, sorry, how do we? Okay, so when we're determining if we need to fix this, we're probably just doing like a search for the CSS class of dropdown. Now, if we use a helper like dropdown tag, we might not use this specific CSS class, but it might be generated. Okay, that's what that means. Not relevant to us. Okay, no, nothing else. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at some similar issues that have been completed, and we'll see if we can find something that's close to what we are going to try to do here. Alright, just picking one at random really. Great, so this is the same content as ours, so it's probably similar. This is different, availability and testing. Is a suggestion to add a component test around the webhook test functionality that triggers a test request. This should be done independently of the dropdown. I don't know what this means. What is a component test? Let's refer to our docs. So Particularly, this is a page we want, front-end standards, testing standards. There's a lot of information here, but what we really want to know is what a component test is. If you're looking for a guide on view component testing, this is separate. It's not what we want. Yep, nothing. So I'm going to look in like their titles. No. Okay, so a component test is sometimes also, might be wrong, I'm pretty sure I'm right. Component and a unit test are really similar. There's another section here, right? So unit test is different. What I want is, there's a page I know where we have testing levels. That's what I want. Perfect. So what is each of these, right? I'll tell you what I know. I don't know everything on it, so if you have more questions, please ask and we can still answer them. So end-to-end test, this is so the way we do an end-to-end test is in Ruby on Rails. We use I can't remember, I think it's Capybara. And what it does is it creates a it creates a Chrome browser and Chromium, I don't know. It creates a basic Chrome browser. It will run GitLab, and then you write the functions that, like, okay, you need to click on this link, click on this button, fill in this form, click next, the same way a user would. So this is an end-to-end test because it tests like the front end, the back end, everything, make sure it all works together nicely. Cool. Feature tests, I thought was an end-to-end test, but just for like a specific feature, but we can have a read. Integration test, I don't know, honestly. Unit test, so unit test is where we have a function and we're testing this function. We're testing this unit of code. Interestingly, a component, like when we look at a view component, a component kind of is a function, like it is a unit. Whether it's a component or a function, it's also a unit. So this is also relevant here. I think it'd be interesting to get someone who's a bit more expert on how this works to talk about it, but for now you got me. You can also read this page yourself. You saw how I googled it. Please read it and tell me if I'm wrong. Alright, so how do we do a unit test? It's different if it's in different parts, because this is JavaScript and this is Ruby. Okay, and then it talks about like how to write a unit test and what to keep in it. Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to our issue. It's a bit of a rabbit hole. It's okay. It's useful learning. Like, don't, yeah, let yourself rabbit hole. Just let yourself read about things like this. Just good to keep in mind. Sometimes you need to come back to where you're going. You need to focus on what you're doing. Okay, whatever. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Alright, so what I'm going to do is look at the merge request that's attached here. Might also read the comments because this is going to be useful. There is a list of links to test webhooks that have been set up. Okay. It's not a menu. I don't think it's a list box, since nothing remains selected after clicking them. So we can also look at like what is the difference between the different drop downs. We're going to get there. As I said, this is a it's a difficult task. Yeah, it's not it's not an easy one. But yeah, if you do more difficult tasks, it's going to be useful learning. You'll learn a lot more. Anyway, okay, ready for the OKR? If you want to know what GitLab OKRs are, just Google it. Objective and key results. So this is like our goals for the quarter. Alright, as it can be migrated to GitLab redirect listbox tag, which is probably, yeah, so this is a Ruby helper. Good to know. Right, and it gives us a good description of what it is. So what happens here is if we have a dropdown that instead could be defined as a redirect list box tag, which is defined here as new features should use view directly. Fine, not relevant to us. The items parameter must be an array of hashes, each one with the value of value, text, and href. So this is important because it means, like, what I understand from the name of this is it is a list of links. So we have a drop down, click more, and then it's just a list of links. They're not buttons. They're not going to create like a alert, not an alert, a pop over. I can't remember what it's called. Whatever. Modal. It's not going to make a modal. This is a link. Just go somewhere. It's easy. So, how to use this? So if this is a list of links, that's going to make our life a lot easier, because then we can use this GitLab redirect list box tag. Okay, so in this case, it might not be the best option. It does a redirect to, which I would have thought is similar to a link, while we were actually relying on the data method post. Okay, some Rails magic. Good to know. Sometimes Rail can be real confusing, because it does a lot of things for you. Anyway, I'm no expert. Alright, so its API might not be compatible yet. If we want to use it, we'll need to make some changes. Yeah, and then after taking a look at this view, the amount of work to replace is non-trivial and would most likely involve a large refactor and unassigning myself. Okay, again, if you have particularly like a GitLab engineer saying this, like, be aware that it's gonna be a big issue, right? Okay, and then Mark's picked this up 4 months ago and completed it 3 months ago, so like it's probably taken him a month. Anyway, we're going to look at the output, like what is merged. So so what's happening here is, he said, migrating the hook test to a dropdown to GL disclosure dropdown. This is important because GL disclosure dropdown, I'm pretty sure, is only a view component. So what he might have done here is moved this page or this section from HAML to view, which is non-trivial. It's a big task. Okay, other things this does, makes the button spacing more robust, so some CSS changes. Migrated the buttons. Okay, there's some difficult setup because it's for hooks. Hopefully that doesn't affect us. I don't think so. So we can see here, what I want to look at first is the HAML, right? That's where I'm going to start, because what I want to see is, like, what I'm looking for is, I'm a bit worried that this is becoming a view component, which is significant. So yeah, let's try to work this out. Okay, so for the webhook hook, what we have is we're getting rid of this, and we're replacing it with this, which is just some buttons which need to be replaced. Yeah, I think this is maybe just migrating the buttons. Okay, this is the bit that's, yeah, this is going to be difficult. So we have a web hook test drop down. So this is how we used to do it. We're using like Bootstrap Dropdown, right? Now we're using JS webhook test dropdown, which is probably a view component, particularly because it has data. So the way this works here, this is super interesting. I think it is anyway. Is so the way our web server works, right? So Ruby on Rails will manage the route, right? Tell me what route we're on, tell me who's logged in, all this stuff, decide what page we're going to show. This is all done on the back end, so then it's server-side rendered, right, mostly. So our HTML is generated by the backend, Ruby on Rails, using HAML, HTML templating language. Now, when we want to insert a view component into this page, this is how we do it. We give it a, in this case we have a class, which I would think implies like this is a reusable view component, which might be used a couple of different times. Otherwise, I would expect it to be a ID. But because it's a dropdown, probably we're going to create a whole new view app just for this dropdown. Okay, that's what this is saying. So what happens is we create a div with the class name or ID of whatever we're calling our component, and then this is an interesting bit. We're passing some data into the HTML. So you can see how this looks like in the page source. So the page source is what gets sent to the browser, right? So if you look at like, if you inspect, this is already built using the JavaScript page source pre-JavaScript build. So what we're looking for is, the way this works is it says like data items. So the way this will look like here is data dash items. If we're rendering this one, right? But here, where this is a separate, this is a different view application. If we look at the class or the ID, we can see what it is called. So the ID is JS checkout modal, right? So when we render in the HAML JS checkout modal, we're adding a bunch of data points. So this would be is fork, can merge, reviewing docs path, source branch. So what's happening here is we're taking this data and putting it into the HTML, and then when our view app is built, it picks up this element, it builds a view app in its place, and it takes these data points and injects it into the view app. So then the view app does not have to immediately make an API call to our GraphQL server or something else to get this information. It's passed automatically, which makes our website a lot faster. Okay, so we have what looks like a view component and some data, almost definitely a view component. So I'm going to look at where is this rendered. So in app assets JavaScript webhooks index.js, this is again some Ruby magic. So what happens is when this is, again, I'm not great on this. I'll tell you how I understand it to work, but I might be wrong. Okay, so where were we just? We were here. So webhooks test button, something is pulling in this JavaScript page. Yeah. Anyway, something is bringing in this JavaScript doc, and what this JavaScript doc does is it's creating a couple of components here. So we're going to look at this in full. So we're exporting a default. Okay, I don't know why one's default, one's named. It's okay. It's not super important at the moment. But what's happening is we have this is a JS view webhook form. So what's happening is we're getting that element. We're using a query selector. So we're looking for this class. It's no element dropper. Now we're going to extract the data from the element, like we saw in a page source. This one, we're extracting this data. So the way this looks like is we'll have data-URL, which will have it'll have data dot initial URL and data dash initial dash URL, data dash URL dash variables, and this is converted to JavaScript by some way of magic when we look at element.dataset, and then we're renaming URL, right? I think that's what's happening here. Close enough. Alright, so then we're building a new view element, application. We're giving it its root element. We're giving it a name. The name is important for the view dev tools. Yep. And then we're giving it these props. So we're creating an application. We're giving it props. And these props are coming from the data set, which are coming from the HAML. Okay. Alright. So here we have initialize hook test dropdown, which is going to take items and size and make a view component. But this is a function. You pass the element to it. Okay, so what's happening here is this is where we initialize our dropdowns. So initialize hook test dropdowns. It's multiple. This is why it's a class and not a ID. So the selector, if we don't give it a different thing, if we don't give it a specific, this is the default. You know how to read code, I'm sure. Okay, so then what we're doing is we're finding all the selectors, and then for each selector we are initializing the hook dropdown test dropdown. So for each class of this we find on the page, we're going to create a view element called test dropdown. Okay, so test dropdown, because it's called test dropdown, I'm going to assume it's to do with like the hook tests. It's not an experiment. So this is probably only going to be useful for this one section, but that's okay. Alright, so Oh, this looks exciting. Great. Alright, so we have a new component. And now we're in view, right? We've come from HAML. And now we're in view. And we have our props from HAML. Alright. So, where are we going to start? Yeah, so it's just converting it to GitLab disclosure dropdown, which is a GitLab UI component, and it's just giving it the items and the size. That's pretty straightforward. But this, let's read this. So this is a hack. So let's not plan to use the same thing. It's hacking Rails UJS. I don't know what that is. Data method handling. More obvious approach of one, declaratively rendering the links using GitLab disclosure dropdown list item sort, and 2, using items to extra attributes to set the data methods attributes on the links don't work and are laid out on this. Okay, so what's happening here is, remember in our issue, let's have a look at the issue again. There was some comment on this. This was the issue where we're doing redirect to, but we have to do data method post. I don't know what that is or why. That's why we've got this workaround, because it's not just a link. If we just had links, then we would just use disclosure dropdown, no problem. In which case it would be a far more reusable component, and then maybe we have some view component we can use in our issue. Okay. Alright, what else is in here? These are tests. So the tests need to be updated because instead of a link, now we have a button, because that's how disclosure dropdown works. So I think if there weren't buttons, we'd use a different kind of dropdown. I think it's called a list box, I'm not sure. Or we could just use the HAML component, the Rails helper that we have to render the list. Okay, and this is testing the component, which is a unit test and also a component test, right? Anyway, so these are the Ruby tests. These are a lot harder to write, particularly if you're not used to Ruby. And as a front-end engineer at GitLab, this is about as much Ruby as we need to do. Usually, we just do HAML, but we also write feature tests. So feature tests would be like, instead of, we're still building a whole new environment, we're still using Chrome, but what we're doing is we're just testing that this feature works. So this feature is webhook tests, so it's only making sure that works. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so what I'd like to know, now we're looking at our issue, is I want to know that this file, what is it actually doing? Is it rendering a list of links? That would make our life a lot easier. If it's rendering buttons, that's going to make our life harder. So let's find out. Okay. So we don't have any instructions on how to replicate this. So we're just going to have to work it out. I'll just make sure our GTK is running. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the path of this file to work out, like, is it going to tell us where this is rendered? In this case, views layouts, I'm not sure. I don't think that's I don't think layouts is a URL. I might be wrong. Oh, what does that mean? No idea. I'll leave that alone. You can see, like, this part of the code base is pretty old. Anyway, just good to be aware of. That's why it's difficult. Anyway, I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is search for the name of this file and see, like, what renders this. So when it renders it, it's gonna be in Rails. It doesn't use like .haml, whatever, and obviously it's not gonna have my local. It's not gonna have GitLab. It's probably not gonna have. Oh, okay, fine. It does have app. Okay, so this is the page. This is the thing that renders this view, or maybe it's the test for it. This could be for tests. Yeah, I think it is. It's for tests. Yep. That's okay. And so this will be our test for this page. Okay. So so we're just slowly gonna remove like part of the path, because it's going to be local, right? So this looks like it, but again, this is a test. This is a HAML spec. Yeah, so now we're starting to get stuck, because if we do a search for terms, yeah, it's not going to be useful at all. But I want to know, where is this rendered? So maybe we can have a look at the folder, see if this is useful. So what is layouts? Like, is layouts a URL that I don't know about? Maybe. Okay, but this might be a layout for projects generally. Okay. So maybe it's just for terms. So we can look up terms, I guess. I don't know how we're going to do that. No idea. I assume in the admin. Oh, we were reading about how to do this somewhere. Maybe in our issue? Yeah, okay, cool. Right, I forgot about this. Cool. So, this is the user dropdown on the terms page. And we're going to follow this guide to enable the feature, which I think is this. Yeah. Cool. So we're going to follow this guide. So an administrator can enforce an accepted terms of use privacy policy. When this option is enabled, new and existing users must accept the terms. Okay. So what this means is, if you are, so this is for self-managed, so if you have a self-managed instance of GitLab, what you can do is enforce that your users accept a specific terms and conditions to use your own self-managed version of GitLab. So that's what this is for. And again, self-managed sometimes can be a lot harder to test, but GDK, this is essentially a self-managed instance, so maybe we'll be okay. When it's enabled, you can view the terms of service here. Yeah, great. So how do you enable it? On the top bar, we're going to look at admin, settings general, terms of service. So to go to admin area, we're going to go to, we're already there, but I'll show you again. Again, this is in the new navigation. Okay, your work, admin area. General settings, terms of service, users must all you must accept this if you want to use. Okay, cool. So this is one issue that we might have because I don't quite know. I think what happens here is we have like another like back end of GitLab that is called like the GitLab runner, and this needs to run on your local instance. I'm just going to close the window for the sound. Okay, so this might be an issue. Let's try to work it out. Okay, yeah, I mean that looks straightforward, doesn't it? But it might not be. And then for each update to the terms, a new version is stored. When it is enabled, yeah. Okay. Alright. So what I want to do is run this in the GDK, and this might be yeah. Why is that spelt wrong? Oh. Have a look at this. Okay, so this is how to get a self-managed license. It's not relevant. This is the same page we're on. I want to say GDK. I don't know. This is for GitLab pages. So maybe we can do GDK runners, but oh my gosh, I do not want to start this. So to run a pipeline, you need a runner. Also possible, you need a runner for this. Yeah. This is not something I'm comfortable in. We can do it, but it's going to be a bit of learning. Alright, so let's just make sure that didn't actually work. Oh, it has saved it, so that's good. Let's just refresh. Okay, great. It saved part of it. Let's refresh and see if no. It saved this part. It's not saved this. So we have a look at the error again. So our error is what? Okay, that's fine. In right using the load balancer. I don't know what that is. The cipher error. No. Okay, just I'm gonna try one more time. I'm gonna do a hard reset, hard reload. Yeah. Okay, so I don't think we're going to be able to do this without working out this, why it's crashing. Alright, we can try this. Okay, expected. So what we're hoping for is our dropdown. We don't need to test the feature. We're just trying to load our dropdown. Cool. Okay. Changes the coolest. Great. Okay, cool. Here's our dropdown. That's good. Because yeah, it means this is like this is the thing we have to fix, right? So what I want to know is this code creating that dropdown, and how do we test that? So one thing we can do is we can look at okay, so what this says is if the header is a link, use a dropdown. I don't know what this is. Current user dropdown. So this is rendering current user dropdown. We're going to try open that. Okay. So current user dropdown. Yeah. So this is the current user dropdown. Alright. But don't need this. But what's happening here is, so we've got a card, right? Which has the header, which has the GitLab logo. Here's our header. Then in this card we have a body which has a nav bar that's collapsed. In that collapsed nav bar is an unordered list nav bar. Nav. Fine. Okay. This is our problem. This unordered list has a header user dropdown with a link to the current user. Okay, so maybe this is our list. Oh, we can see it. Right? So here's our unordered list, which happens in here, which happens in this. Okay, so here is our nav bar. Here is our unordered list. It might just have one list item. It does. One list item. It has, in the list item, it has a link, which is to the user ID. So I guess if you click on this, you might go to the user, like GitLab/user. But it's acting as a button, not a list, not a link. So I don't know why that is. That's strange. But what happens here is we have the drop down menu. It's currently hidden. When we click, it's unhidden. So now we have this begins the app view layout current user dropdown. This is where that begins. So now we're on here, which is fine. This works. So what we need to do is, what do we need to change here to make sure that this still works? Okay, it's a good question. I think we made some good progress. I'm going to stop the recording here, take a break, and maybe try again this afternoon or later in the week. Thanks for watching. Alright, so where we were
is when we clicked save, it didn't work. I thought it was to do with the runner. It was not. Excuse me. What was the problem is I needed to do. I can't think of what it was. GTK pristine. So one thing to know is so GitLab, we just released version 16. As you can see, GitLab release cycles. So each month we release a small release, a minor release, I guess, and then once a year we release a major release where things break, right? So so when people are updating their self-hosted instances, when people are updating their self-hosted instances, then they'll have to do, if they only update once a year, this is the time where things break. So if we do any breaking changes, it happens in this one time, which happens, it's just happened, right, on the 22nd, I guess. So, yeah. So a couple of things broke. I needed to do GTK pristine, just like, GTK pristine. Pristine. So what this does is it clears your database, sets up a new database. Might have been reset data. It's one of these. I think they're pretty similar, right? So deletes your database, so my GTK is fresh. Okay. So excuse me. Alright, so it works now. So if we say save changes, you as one of the users, you must also accept the terms and conditions. So it's going to give us a terms and conditions page that we have to accept to go back. Okay, saved successfully. And then, when I just changed it before, it asked me to agree and just added this. So I would have expected us to give a new one, but in any case, we can find the page like this. Okay, so where we were is just trying to work out why is this an unordered list? Should it be? Why is this a list item? Can this just be, why is that? And then the next thing here is what is this drop down doing? Why is this a drop down? Because what's actually happening here is we're using a class of user dropdown class, right? And what user dropdown class does is it creates what was it? Okay, so this bit, drop down menu right, this opens up, it renders this partial, which is this, which is its own. Okay, so this is a list, but this must be used somewhere else as well, right? So what I'd like to do, one thing we can do is find out where else is this rendered. So it's rendered in the terms. Is this a reused component or is it not? So this is app layouts header. So I think this is using the same. It's using the same partial in the header that it's using in the terms and conditions. It's also using it in current user dropdown, which is in the header. So what I imagine it to be is if we go back, we have a look at this header in old navigation. This is the same component as this. Probably. Maybe. That's what I'm trying to work out. So then, is this using an outdated dropdown? Because you really want to be careful adjusting this. Or is it using the correct dropdown? So one way we can find out is so in our issue we have, what we need to do is replace Bootstrap Dropdown. So I want to work out like what is Bootstrap Dropdown. Which line is it picking up here? So one thing we can do is we can look at the Pajamas migration scanner, adoption scanner. This is a scan of our entire code base and looking for like, are we using buttons correctly? 712 correct buttons, 445 incorrect buttons. So we want to look at dropdown, we want to look at the Bootstrap ones, and then we can see a list of Bootstrap. So what I particularly want to know is like, what is it searching for? So here it's picking up this data toggle dropdown. This is picking up data toggle dropdown. Okay, same thing more or less. Toggle dropdown. So where toggle dropdown is Bootstrap. Okay, so here we have now where's our original? This one. So because it says data toggle, this is Bootstrap. And my question is, why is this here and not in here? I would have expected a partial to have the word current user dropdown to be using a dropdown. So we're going to look for the word dropdown, I guess. Yeah. So this is just rendering the items in the dropdown, but it's giving us an unordered list. So, that's what I was going to do. So this current user dropdown is rendered in a few different places. One is here, which is where we are. Another one is in itself. That can't be right. Oh, no, it's not. Dropdown item. Okay, fine, fair enough. And then here, this is the header, and it's rendering the same list, but it's rendering it differently. So here we have JS nav user dropdown class dropdown, and this toggle dropdown. I think this is a. I think this is also a Bootstrap dropdown. Alright. So here we've got, this got a bit harder. So one thing I'd like to do is verify that. So I'd expect it also to pop up here. So this file name is default. Yeah, cool. So this here is the header in the header layout. So this is an important issue, and it's also one that's likely to be have a lot more notice on it, because it's a big one. So we're going to look for, actually we can just look for default HTML. No, that's not it, but it's not likely to be anywhere. So we can also look for the relative path. Like then, if this is using Bootstrap, there must be an issue for it. Okay. Let's have a look at this. How can we reduce the complexity within the navbar partial? Excuse me. Alright. Yeah. I just also want to look for navbar and the word. So I also want to look for the word bootstrap. Actually, it might be closed. Ideally, it's closed, because then someone's done it. Okay, button. So again, we're still trying to understand this code at the moment. Okay, great, perfect. This is it. That's what we're looking for. So here is a closed issue that's saying we want to replace the Bootstrap dropdown. So I'm going to look at either there's a merge request, which doesn't look like, or we decided not to do it for a reason. And if we decided not to do it for a reason, the same reason is going to apply here, because it's using the same component, the same partial. Okay, so Mark is saying there are 5 dropdowns that directly or indirectly included in this file. All of them seem pretty clearly, dropdown disclosure, as they are generally lists of links. Okay. So here are all the possible dropdowns, I guess. Okay. What's less clear is the search. I think it's a dropdown. Oh, so we're talking about this entire file. The one that we care about is this. This is the one that we're looking at, the user. Okay, search we don't care about. I'm going to leave this as dropdown unknown for now, as several of these dropdowns have their own files and issues. Anyway, we can revisit it later. Okay, cool. So IP is saying, do you think it's worthwhile to work on this in the meantime, or should we leave it until the new navigation is out, which is out now? And then Sam is saying we should leave it. We still need to support the old nav for a while, so any improvements to it would be useful. Plus, we want to introduce a toggle to opt in or out of the new navigation soon. That's there, you've seen me use it. It's this one. I've lost my place, and that lives inside one of these drop downs. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Finally, if we're smart about how we do this, we may be able to reuse the components in the new nav, which would be useful. It's already done. But Mark pointed out there's 5 drop downs. We should split this into 5 migrations. And then Sam came back and said, I changed my mind, this would be a useless migration, I'm going to close it. Great, cool. Alright, so we can close our issue, because if this is a useless migration, probably the other one is. I'm going to tag Sam and ask. Sam is the engineering manager for Foundations, my manager also. So I'm going to tag him in this issue, and I'll ask him if it's worth closing it or not. Okay. Some cool things you can do here, I'll show you. So that's not right. It's a, hang on. I think it's right. Okay, you can either do exclamation mark, which I think is an MR or hash for a issue. So it'll auto-populate. I just want to make sure it's the right one. In preview, yeah. Cool. You get this fancy link. You can do the same for a merge request, but it's exclamation point. Since you said it wasn't worth doing migration there, oh, that's not quite right. Okay, just cover this. Right, so I saw that this issue, so in this issue, the nav bar user dropdown is included. Okay, and this file makes use of the same partial. And also the drop down is misplaced. So maybe we need to so this file makes use of the same partial as the nav bar. So should it also be closed? Okay, so yeah, I mean this was a while ago and I don't expect Sam to remember it, so to make it easier for him, I'm going to post a link to the chat where he was discussing that. The other thing I want to say here is also, as pointed out in this issue, the drop down is misplaced. So even if we do fix it, it needs a lot more work, right? Even if we migrate it. And what I might also do is I might reference this recording in the issue so that if anyone else I don't know, maybe it's interesting, but yeah, it's a bit of a disappointing end to our story, but I hope it was useful to see, like, with an issue like this, how do we tackle it? It's a couple years old. It's pretty complex. There's other similar ones, so we learnt how to, how to work out where this is being rendered, what it looks like. We had to look at similar issues, and we found the similar issues were close. We also worked out how to render it, which was a bit of an adventure. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. But yeah, thanks for joining.